Good afternoon, West Texas. Hope everybody is hanging in there and taking all the necessary precautions to prevent the spread of the virus. This is not just a whole of government approach, it is the whole of America approach. And we put a great deal of emphasis on individual freedoms and rights and responsibility. So we've got to all take responsibility here to make sure that we contain this virus, we manage it, and we don't inundate the system. That is the short-term goal for the next 3 weeks. We will be a pivotal juncture for us. If we can get through these next few weeks, I think the chances of turning the corner and managing this steadily as it dissipates in the near future are far greater. But again, everybody's got to do their part. I know folks are anxious, and I appreciate that. Anytime there are unknowns, there's anxiety, and we don't have a vaccine yet, although the president and this administration and Congress is putting the resources, both public and private, to expedite the process of having such a vaccine. The people are part of a trial to develop that now. In Washington, there was a release of a first treatment. These are therapies that are already on the market. We're going to find out how efficacious they are. They're certainly safe for people to be treated with. That'll be regulated on a state-by-state basis, but a lot more activity will be underway there to make sure that in the near term we can have, and when I say near term, I'd say within months we can have treatments, vaccines, et cetera. In the meantime, again, at every level of government and at every level in the community, we've got to work together to stave off what Italy's going through today, which is very sad. I wanted to engage with you all. I've made lots of conference calls and had lots of meetings and briefings with various folks in the community. Today I talked with educators from various school districts around the district. I've talked to pastors who are also on the front lines in terms of being there to coordinate services for their parishioners and just being there to counsel with folks who are extremely anxious at this time. So I want to thank our teachers and administrators for the good work they do, and we're blessed to have great pastors and churches ministering to the needs of West Texans all around. I also met with, or didn't meet with, but I had a conference call with CEOs of hospitals in the various counties in the district, along with local leaders, mainly mayors, but emergency response officials and other healthcare officials. And I feel very good and strong about the preparedness at the local level. And I feel like they're ready and already engaged. Obviously in Hockley County, Lubbock, and in the Abilene area, there are already some cases. That was to be expected. I want people to understand that, we will see an increase in cases and you will see the numbers go up. I want you to put it in perspective. This is a very contagious virus, and it is also potent, but mainly with those who are seniors and have underlying conditions. Now, we've gotten reports lately that younger people are also being affected, and they're studying that. So these things, information on this virus and the character of the disease is sort of coming in real time, and we're making real-time adjustments accordingly. But the vast majority of people, 80%, who contract the virus will show little to no signs of, little to no symptoms. And that's a positive, and I want people to keep that in mind. Now, the reason we're all engaged and the reason we all have to take ownership of this as a country and as a community is because we cannot allow this to inundate the system, the healthcare system. We cannot allow the spread to reach our elderly friends, neighbors, and relatives, because there are greater consequences and potential disastrous consequences and lethal consequences if we don't. So remember what your local leaders are telling you, and the president and the administration and healthcare experts. Do the basic stuff and do it often, and be intense. And it may feel extreme, but for the next few weeks, you gotta practice extremely good hygiene. You've got to stay away from crowds, and you've got to stay home to the extent that you can. And certainly, if you're sick or somebody in your family's sick, you need to hole up in your house. You need to self-quarantine, and we need to do everything, be as aggressive as possible to prevent the spread. I do think that we've got to balance this with the longer-term repercussions to the economy, to people who may lose their job, people who in fact will need to go home because they're impacted either directly or indirectly. So the government has a role here to provide temporary assistance and to bridge these troubled waters that we're in today, that we will most definitely come out of, and come out, I believe, in the near future. But it can cause major disruption to people's lives, and to small businesses and large alike. Nobody could plan for this. It wasn't anyone's fault. It happened, and we've got to respond in a way that takes care of our families, our workers. First and foremost, that was the bill the president just signed. By the way, it was bipartisan, and I really am encouraged, because it's rare in Washington, but you're seeing Republicans and Democrats come together and work together to put these legislative funding packages that will support, for example, paid family and sick leave for folks affected in the near term. We can obviously extend that as needed, and we're providing free testing for folks regardless of your coverage situation. There are things that are happening throughout the country that vary based on the state and locality. But that's also one of the advantages of our governing system, is that it's decentralized and there's a great deal of discretion and responsibility at the state and local level. And I know Governor Abbott has been very engaged and active. And today he announced he's declaring a public health emergency, and has brought the threshold of numbers of groups of people that you are advised not to participate in, I think from 50 now to 10. But I think the bottom line is stay away from large crowds of people. I know that Mayor Pope in Lubbock and our mayors throughout the district, Mayor Williams in Abilene, our rural community hospitals and community leaders are all at the ready. Churches and other nonprofits are helping coordinate getting food to seniors and checking on folks that are most vulnerable in the community. I know there's been a bunch of relaxed standards and requirements and regulations as part of declaring a national emergency that gives greater nimbleness and flexibility for hospitals and providers, even for schools. As I talked to the administrators and educators earlier on a conference call, they talked about how they were given the discretion, flexibility to make decisions that are in the best interest of their particular school district in consultation with their school boards and parents, et cetera. So, all in all, I think we're managing well at this point, but we are at an inflection juncture over the next 2 to 3 weeks. I certainly think there are some challenges here. I don't want you to think that I don't recognize that, when we didn't have the testing activities and testing capacity that was happening in the early stages, like we saw in other countries, South Korea, well, that was a red flag for me. And I'm certainly looking to drill down and determine exactly what happened and why. But right now, we're just expanding that capacity. I think mainly because we've outsourced and leveraged the private sector, and the private sector moves a lot faster than the CDC or any government bureaucracy. Again, every group and every agency and enterprise has a role, but we've seen some biotech companies step up and accelerate the new testing platforms that have greater throughput and expanding capacity, not just with testing, but with personal protective gear. But as I looked at those choke points, some of that was based on a legacy system that existed in our federal government that has to change. We cannot be this slow out of the gate on testing and other things. Some of that was regulatory in nature from the FDA, and then some of that was supply chain challenges. We cannot depend on China or any other sole source provider of equipment and other critical products for our national security and public safety. That is a disaster. The president has called that out before with respect to strategic metals and making war machines. There are certain things that America must maintain a capacity to make. And it's not just energy independence, it's food security, it's being able to make our medicines and medical equipment. So that's something long-term we've got to look at. And it's something that is a major concern for me and my colleagues. I want to answer some questions and read some of your concerns. It's hard to do that actually while I'm talking to you, but I will pause here in just a minute. I do want to make mention the phases of the federal response. The first phase obviously was the preparedness and emergency response. The Congress came together in a bipartisan way to support the president and the administration's request and provided $8 billion. Much of that was to accelerate vaccine development and treatments. There were a number of other things involved in that first phase, but that was all geared around public safety and health. The second phase was this bill that was recently signed by the president, and it was passed first out of the House. I, again, want to commend Nancy Pelosi and the president and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for putting aside partisanship and finding a common ground and a path forward to move quickly, because the key in a crisis is speed. We won't be as accurate. We won't be as precise. It's just, it's like being in the emergency room. You've got to stabilize the patient before you start getting into the more targeted and surgical approaches to healing the body. We've got to do some things on the front end that will require us to work together quickly and provide that support. Now, that doesn't mean that we do it willy-nilly. It doesn't mean we sign on to any and everything, because there are certain things that give me pause and that you will see some near-term debate on in Phase 3. Phase 1, emergency response. Phase 2 was the support for our workers who are affected and their families. That's paid family and paid medical leave. We do that through a tax break to small businesses with employees of 500 or less, and we give an exemption for those 50 and less if they claim that it's a burden. So that's been the targeted area for Phase 2. We also put free testing in there for everyone. And Phase 3 will be a broader economic assistance package for distressed industries. If we don't do something in the near term, we will have a far greater problem long term, far higher cost to pay with a sustained economic recession. And so we're trying to, again, do what's necessary, keep it temporary, keep it targeted, so that we don't have to suffer the long-term economic problems that would ensue if we do nothing. The last package has distressed industry secured lending, and this is to industries that have been most impacted, like the travel industry, the airlines, hotels, etc. There are SBA loans, expanded capacity there, expanded limit to their loans to address the needs. And then there's a direct assistance component where individuals will actually get direct payments. Now, that's something that's somewhat controversial. I'm not bought into it yet. I think there are ways through tax breaks, unemployment compensation. There'll certainly be a need for that to expand capacity, move quickly there, and SBA disaster-related loans that can be paid back, but could provide liquidity that's needed when you don't have any customers or revenue right now. And the government's saying stay home and hunker down. So we're going to look at that third package because it's a big ticket item. The cost is tremendous. The Senate is debating it now. It'll come to the House and we'll take it from there. But they're talking about $1 trillion. That's not a recurring cost, but it's a big one-time expense. And I've got some ideas there, and I've got some concerns about what I'm hearing in that package, but to be determined. Okay, enough of that. I hope that was somewhat helpful, but we'll drill down on some of your questions. Let's see. So I think that Paula Miller is talking about tax breaks don't help in the near term. Well, the tax break is for the small business to compensate them for paying the paid leave and sick and family leave. So the employer will pay for the sick leave and pay for the family leave. Family leave is 2/3 of your salary. It's to stay home with your children because they've been sent home and there's not a parent there, or to take care of a family member. Sick leave is obviously somebody directly affected or infected by the virus. And those payments will be made by the employer, but they will be compensated or reimbursed through a tax credit, and that happens every week, twice a week. So that system should be efficient, and it should be least disruptive, and you don't have to create a new entitlement program at the federal level to do it. So I find that that's going to be useful. We'll see how it plays out. We'll make the adjustments accordingly. Let's see. Kimberly, thank you, and thank you for your kind words there. But we're going to get through this, guys. We will get through this. America and West Texas is strong and resilient. And the thing that's so wonderful about West Texas is we take care of each other, we love our neighbor, and we're getting to put that in practice for sure. So let's see here. Will flights be canceled around the U.S.? Jeffrey, you know what? They being the federal government and I believe the health experts, because of the being contained in the airplane and there are very few passengers now, but it's just too easy to provide a threat to spreading the virus if you travel on an airplane. So they say only essential travel. And so I would encourage folks for the next few weeks to not travel on an airplane if you can help it. That's, by the way, why we have a need for economic assistance in the near term, liquidity for the airline industry, because the government is saying, don't do this. We don't want to inundate the system. We don't want a crisis like Italy, and that's part of the strategy. Let's see. When will the House reconvene? That's another Paula Miller. Paula, you're all over the place. I've seen you pop up left and right. There's my friend Ryan Holmes, Sylvia Leal. I'm glad my friends are engaging here too. Paula, I don't know when we're going to reconvene. Here's the candid answer. We're going to need to vote on this third package. I've got to look at it. I've got to decide what I support. I've got to debate it with my colleagues and make sure that we provide the best, most responsible bridge in assistance without unintended consequences and without bad policy and bad precedents. You know, I don't want to. I don't think you can over-respond in the sense of precautionary measures and containment and mitigation of spread. I do think we could over-respond in the way we assist industry and where we put economic stimuli. So we need to look at that so that we do it right and responsibly. We may have a situation where we've got to vote from a distance, and telework ourselves. We've had two members of Congress on the House side that have tested positive. And this is something where we say don't go to places where there are crowds of 50 or more, and now 10 or more in Texas. Well, we have 435 members of Congress. And I think we ought to use the good judgment that we're asking others to exercise by allowing us to vote at a distance. But we will convene. And by the way, we are talking regularly with the administration. In fact, I have a leadership call today with our conference, and I talked to Senator Cornyn earlier today, but there's just constant communication in briefings and meetings and conference calls, and I just wanted to engage in this format, in this forum, with my constituents. Let's see. I don't, sorry, it's just a lot coming in. Sammy Farmer, how you doing out there in the Concho Valley? We will get through this. Strong people guiding and helping us. Look, we are a nation that is built on a foundation of faith in God, and that is so embedded in our value system and in our culture that our motto is "In God We Trust." And I would ask all of you to keep praying for this country and pray for wisdom for our leaders, not just me, but and both sides of the aisle. I mean, my goodness, we're Americans first, and we're doing everything together to try to get through this and get to the other side and get back to normal and bounce back to that amazing place of unprecedented economic growth and opportunity that we were enjoying before this pandemic hit our shores. So please pray for your leaders. Pray especially for those families affected and those who are struggling with it, even to sustain life. So remember, in God we trust, and in these times we can be reminded of what's most important in life: our families, our relationships, and certainly at the top of that is our relationship with God, and the fact that He's guided us along through a lot of trials and tribulations and challenges, and we've prevailed, and we will prevail in this case as well. So keep the faith and keep praying. Let's see. Just a lot coming in, guys, on we need help with our business here and there. Here's the thing. This next phase 3, will provide various provisions of economic assistance in the form of zero interest loans like SBA loans. There'll be other ways to support our business communities so that they don't lay off folks. At the end of the day, we need to have guardrails on this money to make sure that the business owners are putting that money towards payroll and rent and other things, and especially with the larger companies. We want to make sure the controls are in place so that they put that money where we can sustain the full employment that we had prior to this, but obviously also preparing for those who may be laid off and need that unemployment insurance, and in a more sustained way. So there's just some really, let's see. I'm just reading as they come in. Sorry, guys. Well, the House is coming back into session. Will flights be canceled? Taylor County hasn't been declared as a disaster yet, and this is hurting small businesses. I know that the governor has declared a public health emergency for the state of Texas. You will have to talk to your local authorities, Sylvia, in terms of Taylor County's declaration. But I know that the local leaders, like Mayor Williams and other local leaders in Taylor County, have been very engaged with me and their constituents. And it's been it's made me very proud to see how our communities are staying in constant contact and communication with their citizens and fellow West Texans, and making the adjustments as necessary. This is a fluid situation, and we're not a group of people that waits on the federal government to do everything. We've got some big decisions to make up here, but I know the folks back home are doing what they need to do to protect our children in our schools. Again, our seniors and most vulnerable. I've seen such amazing and inspiring stories of people that are taking food to elderly people who are in isolated places. I've seen pictures of schools that are providing the lunch service program to kids that live in food insecure homes. And I've heard stories, countless stories, of how folks are volunteering their time to make sure that folks can ride this thing out with as least disruption and harm as possible. Let's see here. It says, we need more of this. Will you consider doing a podcast? Sure. I mean, we're trying to give you guys links to all the various resources for the latest and greatest information. Obviously, the president and the administration are in continuous communication and mode, and I've watched the briefings like you all. I'm talking to White House officials, but I think getting ahead of this, just my 2 cents, while we've had some challenges on the testing capacity and the protective gear capacity and supply chain issues, I think the president's decision to restrict travel early, to be aggressive at screening at airports and self-quarantines really gave us the time to get out in front of this and stay ahead of the curve. And again, the next few weeks will be critical to stay ahead of that, manage it at this point going forward. Something over here says something about podcasts and it's spinning, but I feel like all the, let's see, Amber Charter, sorry to hear, frown face, Nancy Nicholson from Abilene, thumbs up. Clearly I am, don't worry, I've got good millennials around me to help me with this, but I think that's it, guys. I don't want to wear you out on my first Facebook Live here. Ryan Holmes, I know one of the viral videos is spring break in Miami. Will that be something Miami has to handle or highlight? Ryan, yeah, that's a great example of what not to do. And I think it's been very disappointing and upsetting to folks to see people running around on a beach and acting as if we're not in a national emergency situation and potential crisis situation. And so we just have to look at that, and we have to communicate with our circles of friends and family and absolutely bear down in the next few weeks. Again, let's not panic. When you look at this in context, you look at the seasonal flu and the damage it does. Millions upon millions get it. Tens of thousands die from it every year. And we're still at a relatively low risk of contracting it. We're even at a much lower risk of having any lethal effects or fatal effects. But again, we've got to work together. We've got to be responsible and do our part. So nice work. That's always nice to see. Thanks for taking the time to talk. That's great. Our local schools in Young County are working hard to ensure education and food is provided for our students. Look, I am so impressed. Again, I'm inspired by the community spirit, by the American spirit, by the West Texas spirit. People are all jumping in, rolling up their sleeves and doing their part. The schools, you talk about getting in the mix and and doing what it takes to make sure that families are taken care of. Some schools are looking to potentially open back up. They've extended spring break for a week, and their hopes are to have a responsible way of ramping back up. Some have said, we're going to just let this ride out for the year. You got to do what's best for your community. But many, if not all of them, are finding ways to engage with the students and to give them an educational experience throughout the remainder of the semester, whether they come back or not, and whether they're graded on it or not. And they're touching base with families, and they are a hub of support and information for families throughout the district. So again, thank you to our independent school districts, to all of our school board members, and to our parents that are working together to make this the least disruptive experience for our kids. Thank you, Amber, for saying we continue to pray for you, and that is, and God is in control. I agree. Very encouraging, guys. Has come to screech. He says, I'm an owner. This is Ed Gongora. I'm an owner of a 2-year-old brick and mortar, non-essential, very small mom and pop business that's come to a screech. Ed, you and a lot of others are experiencing this disaster in a personal way because you're a sole proprietor. I want you to know that the same benefits we provided for the small businesses of 500 and under for paid sick and paid family leave, you can avail yourself of that as well. And if you are affected by this sickness, this virus, or someone in your family, now you're going to say, well, that's great, but I'm not sick. I just don't have any customers. I don't have any revenue. How am I going to stay solvent and keep from going out of business? That's where this phase 3 is critical. We have disaster loans now at SBA, but we need to expand the capacity and funding. We need to raise the loan limit, and we need to provide other mechanisms of support. That's coming. I think the Senate will pass their package out, this phase 3 funding package, economic assistance, this week, and then we will find out if the House can vote remotely so that we can move this through. So very sympathetic, trying to move quickly. I also have heard from other communities like Abilene, where the Chamber of Commerce is banding together to support their local businesses and doing everything they can to provide the liquidity, credit, and just all-around support. So I think another good thing to do, Ed and others, is to reach out to the Chamber and see if there's anything there just for the breathing room you might need between now and when we pass this third tranche. Appreciate all you. Thank you. Thank you, Jay Holt. Well, folks, let's call this a wrap for our first live update. There's just so much. I've got papers all strewn about my desk, and there's just so many things. The president has updated recently about invoking the Defense Purchasing Act and what that does to accelerate the volume of ventilators and other critical equipment. I know every day they're looking to knock down barriers and cut through red tape to move this thing along. And, every day gets better. We get stronger. We're better positioned. And again, let's all do our part. Let's get through these next few weeks so that we can ride this thing out with and look back and say, because we came together as a community and a country, when we do that, good things happen. And hopefully we can hearken back to this as political leaders and say, hey, look what happens when we come together and as Americans first and put the interest of our country and find ways to compromise in a way that's positive and productive for our citizens. Well, that's what you've seen as of recently. Let's hope we can get there with this third tranche. I want to be careful on the direct assistance payments. That's something I'm going to scrutinize heavily, but we've got to move quickly. And thank y'all for letting me represent you. It's an honor. and a privilege for me and my family. So on behalf of my family, thank you. And God bless America, and go West Texas.